Hello ladies, welcome to Homemaking Radio. I've designed these videos so that you can turn them on while you make your beds and clean up a room, and I've designed them to be about 45 minutes or an hour so you can get something done. I just love to watch videos on decorating and homemaking, but I haven't got the patience to sit there that long, and I want to always be doing something, so this is your chance to have something playing. It's always pleasant, isn't it, to have friends or company, someone on the phone while you do some of these repetitive jobs, repeated jobs, tedious jobs, things that you have to do in the home. And we're finding more and more that ladies are loving it. They're home. They're seeing how much there is to do. Keep them busy all day long. It's just never never done. Isn't there an old little poem? A man's work is from sun to sun, but a woman's work is never done. Because when a man came home out of the fields, a woman still had to fix the dinner, clean that all up, and get the children in bed, and then maybe do a nighttime routine, whereas a man was just finished. And this is so true. We're finding that out again, aren't we? And today I would like to welcome you if you're new here, and go to the left on my blog here. In fact, be watching this on my blog where it's embedded. You'll be more likely to see it if something goes wrong on YouTube. It's going to be embedded, and there's a continuous playlist so you can hear the other ones too. And I would like to say that if you are new here, these are designed for homemaker support. And you know, you can't work in a group. We don't have a homemaking group. We don't have homemaking meetings because it would take us away from our responsibility, from our home. Even if all the work is done, you have to be in your house. You're guarding it. You're guarding your children. You're keeping an eye on things. And the Bible says the woman is to guard and guide her home. And when we look up that word guard in the Greek, in that particular context, it's like military. So it's very serious. And so to leave the home is a big step. And I am so glad to be living in this day and age, because now, instead of going to a ladies' day or, you know, having to leave my home and my children, I can stay home, and you can stay home. We can all be here together, and we can encourage one another. Please leave a comment, because that's what encourages me. And your comments make it possible for me to come back and speak more to you. And today I got all dressed up for you, and that's one of the first things that I tell you when you start these blogs, when you start listening. Are you dressed? Or do you have your little boots on? I recommend those more than tennis shoes, more than slippers, more than sandals. These little ankle boots, they're so cute, they're so ladylike. I even have a pink suede pair. And are you dressed? Have you got your hair done? Do you have your skincare all done and taken care of? Because when you're spending a little time in front of the mirror, you're relaxing a little bit, having a look at your eyes. Have your eyes gotten hardened since the current uproar and crisis? If you do not have a sweet, innocent look in your eyes, you need to stop listening to the bad news. You need to stop focusing on things that worry you, because people who are worried, people who are full of anxiety, are in poor health. It will depress your heart, your liver, your kidneys. You'll have more kidney problems if you're angry, more kidney problems if you're upset. And so I have several things that I'd like to recommend to you to do, but today I have a story that I want to read to you. And it has a lot to do with, first I want to tell you that I'm not any more locked down than I ever was. Homemakers, we're used to this. We are home all the time, except we go out for essential things that we need to run our homes. And we have a well-stocked pantry, I think, most of the time. But I remember when my kids were growing up, you couldn't keep enough food in the fridge. Our fridge was always bare. Leftovers, there was no such thing. I know there was someone from a smaller family that came to see us one time and said, well, do you have any leftovers? And I said, we don't have leftovers here, because if they end up in the fridge, if they end up left over, they're eaten throughout the day. We just never had leftovers. And they learned pretty quickly that if you are home, you don't have leftovers. So it was hard. And I think that being a homemaker I feel more comfortable at home, and so it is not a problem for me. It is not a crisis for me, and shouldn't be for you. So I want to talk to you about a couple of things first to preface this story that I'm going to tell you. First of all, people are healthier mentally if they're prayerful, and if you are prayerful, and if you substitute an anxiety, if you substitute a prayer for an anxiety, you're going to be a lot better off. I want to talk to you today about fair weather friends before I get started on this story that I'm going to read to you. Now, a fair weather friend was someone who was all jolly around you when things were going well, and going well for you too, maybe things going well in the world, and well for her, and also well for you. Then they want to be your friends because you're serving them tea, you're giving them encouragement, maybe you're sending them a birthday card, maybe you're taking them out, and you just they just serve them just fine, and they're your friend. But when times are hard and you have a few problems, they get angry. They leave you. And I noticed lately there have been three things that have been happening regarding friendships: fishing, policing, and shaming. Now, you have the state's very clever, isn't it? Because they don't have to have police all around policing us all. They just through the media make people have a strong desire to police someone, to check on them. And then fishing, they have to go fishing first in order before they can police them and shame them. So what they do is they find out if you're going anywhere today, or what are you doing today, and then they will find out if they'll shrug and listen, then they'll ask more questions, and they'll dig further till they find something that they can correct you on or police you on. And then if you're not quite on board with the anxiety and the hype that they have, then they shame you. They say you're not being serious or sympathetic enough. And so this is something that I have noticed. There's fishing, there's policing, and there's shaming. And all this without a court order, without a law passed, without martial law, without any soldiers in the streets. They get the people to fish for information, then to police you. That means, watch you, watch your comings, watch your goings, find out what you're doing so that they can police you, and then shame you. So they shame everybody into being anxious, shame everybody into being, what do you call it, when people have a tremendous anxiety and they panic. I think it's just called panic. Shame you into panic. And of course, at my age, why am I going to panic? I have been through it all already, and it all came to nothing. If you've watched previous videos, I've quoted that several times, and it all came to nothing. And I can remember younger, and I'm embarrassed and ashamed to say how hyped up I was, and with one eye on that TV and the other eye on my kids, and my heart was so divided. And I'm ashamed of that, because you have to obey God rather than men. You have to do what God said do. And He said women are to guard and guide the home. And of course, your guarding and guiding is divided when you are trying to keep up with the latest hype. So, and I guarantee you, here's something I'll guarantee you, and I'm not a prophet, and you don't have to be a prophet to know this. When this has all subsided, they will invent something else. They will create something else, or something real will happen, and they will hype it up and make you frightened so that you can't function. This is very bad for your health. So I want to talk to you about fair weather friends, because this story, and also of scripture that kind of goes with this story, born for adversity. There's a proverb that says, but a brother is born for adversity. I don't know what the first part of that proverb is. I will probably type that into the post for you. But it says a brother is born for adversity. That's the person who says, what's the problem? I've got broad shoulders. Come on, tell me, bring it on. I will fight this. I will debunk it. I will tell you what's going on. Tell me, and then I've got an answer for it. And so a brother is born for adversity. What kind? You might be very young watching this or listening. I hope you're just listening, okay? But I want to show you first before I let you go, because I've talked 10 minutes and I want to show you my teacup. And it's also by that company called Duchess. It has a hydrangea on it. I like hydrangea, don't you? There it is, right there. And I've kept it because of the uniqueness of it. I've never seen anything quite like it. I don't care for, I'm getting rid of the ones that have the handles, and I'm donating them to another ladies group that I know that will use them, and a church. So and then I'm going to Home Goods and Marshalls and, you know, the reject stores, and buying some that are new, and that have the larger handles. But I'm keeping this one because it's just so delightful, and it has the hydrangea on it. I'll put a picture on that in the blog for you. And the other thing I want to show you before I go any further is so that you could go, and I'm sorry I've taken up 10 minutes of your time without showing you this, but if you would like to go to the Dollar Tree, the dollar store, they have these are in the sticker section, and no one's buying them. They're all buying the pretty flowers and everything. This one I'll just read to you. And it's called Hope. And I talked to you about hope yesterday and how wonderful that is, because even if you kind of, quote, see the handwriting on the wall, if you have hope beyond that, your heart beats better, your performance is better. And wouldn't you rather die with hope than die in despair? And because, you know, there's a principle in the thing, and that is to die in to live with hope, and to die with hope is better. And you can't live as though there's no hope, because you're dead while you live. So here are little hope stickers. No one's buying them, and I've been going in every now and then and buying one, because I can put it in an envelope, the whole thing in an envelope, or I can peel them off and put them on a letter or a card. Don't lose hope. You never know what tomorrow may bring. You don't know, do you? And you know, this is all from early childhood training. If children are discouraged, then they can learn from their mama that there will be a better day, that tomorrow will be, because you're wiser, you know this. Pain is real, but so is hope. Never lose hope. In all things, I like this little sticker here, in all things it is better to hope than to despair. And remember in Anne of Green Gables, when Marilla said to Anne, to despair is to turn your back on God. And you are stronger than you think, and always there is hope. There is always hope. No one can take your hope away. No one can destroy hope, because it is something within you that you nurture. So I wanted you to know about that. Now, not everybody is going to be happy with you if you have hope. That's where that fishing, policing, and shaming comes in. If you have hope, you should be ashamed, because you're not participating in this anxiety, and that's going to discourage people from being anxious. You know, don't give people hope, because they might make some progress, and then we won't be able to wallow around in our little sea of despair. It's a strange way to live, isn't it? So remember, a brother is born for adversity. So you say to yourself, hey, if we got a problem, I was born for this and I can fix it. And can you imagine a plumber? Now see, some of these people, these blue-collar workers, and one of my favorite YouTube video that I like to listen to is Blue Collar Logic. If you want to type that in, go listen to him. He's amazing, and he has I like the beginning. He has a little truck in the beginning with a light bulb in the back of it, and the sound of a motor starting the engine. So I don't know. I like trucks, and I like Blue Collar Logic, and we're blue collar people anyway. But when I was educating my children, I educated them for two things: blue collar work and white collar work. So in other words, they could build and they could create and they could do things with their hands and fix things and create things, but they also had the blue collar. They knew how to do they knew how to add, subtract, math. They knew how to write. They could write little booklets, brochures. They could write a church bulletin. They could organize some kind of a plan. They could do house plans. They could draw things. And so we have the blue collar and the white collar. That's the way most Americans are. We're both blue collar and white collar. There's no distinction. So the other thing that you can do besides buy this and, you know, send it out, create cards and send it, you can get folding cards with envelopes in packages sometimes that are already folded, ready for you to fold and stick a sticker on and send it out. And that is a service you can provide for someone. And that is subscribe to. I highly recommend this now. I didn't always because it wasn't as I liked it, but subscribe to Victoria and Tea Time, both published by Hoffman Media, because they have nothing but good news in them. And it'll last you all month. It comes every month, and it'll last you all month. Both of them have good news in them. Tell you how progress being made in the tea industry, progress being made in life, and people who are having women who have bed and breakfast inns, and women who have learned to do something or have made some kind of an artwork, and also they visit different places in the world and show you places that you might not ever go, and the photography is just beautiful. Subscribe to Victoria Magazine and subscribe to Tea Time Magazine, but go to hoffmanmedia.com and see what all they've got. That's the ones where I've been showing you these Celebrate and Entertain magazines, with the one that I showed you that had spring on it and other things. And just go see their paper of these magazines is high quality. Not so much Victoria, but some of their others. So I would say do that. Go buy this. Go subscribe. You might be able to just order something like this, but subscribe to Victoria and Tea Time and anything else that they have. They have Southern Lady, and they have Southern Cooking, lots of cooking magazines, but those are my two favorite there. And the other thing I wanted to tell you before I read this story, this might be a little long, is that one of the companies whose employees are working from home and sending their work in through their computers are telling their employees to laugh about something every day and to go for a walk in the sun every day. And it's been sunny here. It's been wonderful. Go for a walk. And it's really interesting and just heartening to see families out riding their bicycles with their children. And I see children and whole families everywhere. They're sticking together, and that's the way it should be. I don't think it's natural to divide children up from their parents and stick them in an institution with a bunch of kids their own age. I think they should be with families, because we learn multi-generationally, don't we? We learn from each other. The young learn from the knowledge of the older, and the older really need the vitality and interest of the young. And of course, I'm extremely interested in what young people are doing, extremely proud of them too for what they do. And I have my favorite videos of things that young people do that I'm extremely interested in. So going to read you this story. Let me see if I've read everything that I need to on my illogically written notes. I can't even read my own writing. So, okay. Here's what I am going to, the one thing that I forgot was, it's better to light one candle than to curse the darkness. And here we have, just like in Numbers 13 and 14, when I read to you before, you had 8 men coming back with a bad report, saying, yeah, what the Lord said was true. Yeah, it's a great land, but you know, these people are huge and we can't take over. And then you had 2 people lighting a candle, but the darkness overcame the children of Israel, and they wept and wailed all night long over the report, and they even exaggerated it and said, our children will become prey. And they said, these people, and then they tried to stone Aaron because he was giving a good report. And this is what's happening to all of you probably right now. You're trying to calm people down, and you are trying to light a candle, and they don't want the light. They don't want the light. It's very uncomfortable. Have you ever walked into a room and flipped the light on, the overhead light on? I hate those overhead lights, don't you? I've let them all burn out, and I only have the indirect side lamps. I don't like them. And somebody was in there and you didn't know it, and they go, oh, you know, it hurts their light. It hurts their eyes. Well, it hurts their minds. It hurts their brains when you shed a little bit of light on the subject and you tell them how they, you know, are better off behaving this certain way. Now, I don't know if any of you remember And I always am attacked when I mention this movie, Gone with the Wind, because I'm accused of being extremely prejudiced. But Gone with the Wind was a great depiction of how things really were. And if you remember, Melanie was going to have a baby, I think. I haven't watched it in a long time. Don't know if these details are quite right, but I want you to pay attention to the principle of the thing. Melanie was going to have a baby, and Scarlett was going to have to deliver it because the Yankees had invaded the area and were coming closer to their house. And so Scarlett had no choice. She was going to have to deliver this baby, and they had a servant, and I don't know what her name was. Was it Clarissa? I can't remember, and I didn't look it up. But you can go watch this movie and see what happened. But she said, I'm going to need your help. You're going to have to be strong, and I want you to go get me some this and this and this. And she sent her to another part of the house to get some things and bring them back, and you're going to help me deliver this baby. And so the servant went downstairs and then heard some whispers of the other servants that were saying, how close the Yankees were. And so she dropped everything. She had an armful of stuff, I think. She just dropped it all, went into a panic, ran upstairs, and said, "Miss Scarlett, Miss Scarlett!" And she's jumping around yelling. And there's Melanie in the room, having labor pains. And she was this woman was so blinded by this awful anxiety and fear that she wasn't a hero for the lady that was needing help, And I have run into that here. After I have been around someone who's doing all this, I think after they leave, Miss Scarlett, Miss Scarlett. So I'm going to put that in the title, and make sure you're not doing that, okay? Make sure you're not the Miss Scarlett, because if you'll notice, if you ever watched the movie, I believe that Vivian Leigh, she shook Scarlett. She shook this servant, and she said, "Stop that!" She might have even slapped her. I think that was a common thing in the old Hollywood days when someone was just out of their mind, and they were slapped, and then they were like brought back into reality. And so don't do the Miss Scarlett thing, okay? So this is why I'm just setting it up to read this story to you. And first of all, those of you who are offended may go, and you may go listen to something that might help you better. So this is from a book called The Sketchbook of Jeffrey Crayon, which was Washington Irving's popular collection of short stories, travelogues, and essays. The author tells the story of his friend's financial misfortunes and the torturing thoughts he has of sharing his disgrace with his wife. It was written in 1819 through 1920, not sure when, but from the sketchbook. So you can look this up, and I believe I have it on my it's on my blog, and you can type it into the search area. It's called The Wife. Okay, now this time I brought my tissues with me. I just, I can read this. It doesn't affect me that way. We start reading it aloud with a little drama to it, and next thing you know, I'm just crying. So, The Wife. Now, this is written from the perspective of a friend who noticed what happened when his friend had lost his fortune, like the stock market or something, and the reaction of the wife, and how his friend, the husband, his life was changed by this woman because of her strange reaction. Okay? Now, in reading this, I'm not suggesting you all go and live in a tent somewhere and test your mettle, but I'm just saying, in anything, stay steady and enjoy what you have. Okay, The Wife. The treasures of the deep are not so precious as are the concealed comforts of a man locked up in a woman's love. It scents the air of blessings. When I come near the house, what a delicious breath marriage sends forth, the violet beds not sweeter. And that's a quote by someone named Middleton. I have often had occasion to remark the fortitude with which women sustain the most overwhelming reverses of fortune. Those disasters which break down the spirit of a man and prostrate him in the dust seem to call forth the energies of the softer sex, and give such intrepidity and elevation to their character that at times it approaches to sublimity. Nothing can be more touching than to behold a soft and tender female who had been all weakness and dependence, and alive to every trivial roughness, while treading the prosperous paths of life, suddenly rising in mental force to be comforter and supporter of her husband who is under misfortune, and abiding with unshrinking firmness the bitterest blasts of adversity. As the vine, which has long twined its graceful foliage about the oak, has been lifted by it into sunshine, will, when the hardy plant is rifted by the thunderbolt, cling around with its caressing tendrils and bind up its shattered boughs, so is it beautifully ordered by Providence that woman, who is the mere dependent and ornament of man in his happiest hours, should be his stay and solace when smitten with sudden calamity, winding herself into the rugged recesses of his nature, tenderly supporting the drooping head and binding up the broken heart. I was once congratulating a friend who had around him a blooming family knit together in the strongest affection. "I wish you no better lot," said he with his enthusiasm, "than to have a wife and children as I do. If you are prosperous, there they are to share your prosperity. If otherwise, there they are to comfort you." And indeed, I have observed that a married man falling into misfortune is more apt to retrieve his situation in the world than a single one, partly because he is more stimulated to exertion by the necessities of the helpless and beloved beings who depend on him for subsistence, but chiefly because his spirits are soothed and relieved by domestic endearments, and his self-respect kept alive by finding that though all abroad is darkness and humiliation, yet there is still a little world of love at home, of which he is the monarch. Whereas a single man is apt to rush to waste in self-neglect, to fancy himself lonely and abandoned, and his heart to fall to ruin like some deserted mansion for want of an inhabitant. These observations call to mind a little domestic story, of which I once was a witness. My intimate friend Leslie had married a beautiful and accomplished girl, who had been brought up in the midst of fashionable life. She had, it is true, no fortune, but that of my friend was ample, and he delighted in the anticipation of indulging her in every elegant pursuit, and administering to those delicate tastes and fancies that spread a kind of a fascination about her. Her life, he said, shall be like a fairy tale. The very difference in their characters produced a harmonious combination. He was of a romantic and somewhat serious cast. She was all life and gladness. I have often noticed the mute rapture with which he would gaze upon her in company, of which her sprightly powers made her the delight, and how, in the midst of applause, her eye would still turn to him, as if there alone she sought favor and acceptance, when leaning on his arm, her slender form contrasted finely with his tall, manly person. The fond, confiding air with which she looked up to him seemed to call forth a flush of triumphant pride and cherishing tenderness, as if he doted on his lovely burden for its very helplessness. Never did a couple set forward on the flowery path of early and well-suited marriage with a fairer prospect of felicity. It was the misfortune of my friend, however, to have embarked his property in large speculations, and he had not been married many months, when, by a succession of sudden disasters, it was swept away from him, and he found himself reduced to almost penury. For a time he kept the situation to himself, and he went about with a haggard countenance and a breaking heart. His life was but a protracted agony, and what rendered it more insupportable was the necessity of keeping up a smile in the presence of his wife, for he could not bring himself to overwhelm her with the news. She saw, however, with the quick eyes of affection, that all was not well with him. She marked his altered looks and stifled sighs, and was not to be deceived by his sickly and vapid attempts at cheerfulness. She tasked all her sprightly powers and tender blandishments to win him back to happiness, but she only drove the arrow deeper into his soul. The more he saw cause to love her, the more tortured he was at the thought that he was soon to make her wretched. A little while, he thought, he and the smile will vanish from that cheek, the song will die away from those lips, the luster of those eyes will be quenched with sorrow, and the happy heart which now beats lightly in that bosom will be weighed down, like mine, by the cares and miseries of the world. At length he came to me one day, and related his whole situation with a tone of the deepest despair. When I heard him through, I inquired, "Does your wife know about this?" At the question he burst into an agony of tears. "Oh," he cried, "if you have any pity on me, don't mention my wife. It's the thought of her that drives me almost to madness." "And why not?" I said. "She must know it sooner or later. You cannot keep it long from her, and the intelligence may break upon her in a more startling manner than if imparted by yourself, for the accents of those we love soften the harshest tidings. Besides, you're depriving yourself of the comforts of her sympathy. Not merely that, but also endangering the only bond that can keep hearts together in unreserved community of thought and feeling. She will soon perceive that something is secretly preying upon your mind, and true love will not brook reserve. It feels undervalued and outraged, when even the sorrows of those it loves are concealed from it. Oh, but my friend, to think what a blow I am to give to her future prospects, how I am to strike her very soul to the earth, by telling her that her husband is a beggar, that she is to forego the elegancies of life, all the pleasures of society, to shrink with me into indigence and obscurity, to tell her that I have dragged her down from the sphere in which she might have continued to move with constant brightness, the light of every eye, the admiration of every heart. How can she bear it? How can she bear poverty? She has been brought up in all the refinements of opulence. How can she bear neglect? She has been the idol of society. Oh, it will break her heart. It will break her heart." I saw his grief was eloquent, and I let it have its flow, for sorrow relieves itself by words. When it had subsided, he had relapsed into moody silence. I resumed the subject gently, and urged him to break his situation at once to his wife. He shook his head mournfully but positively. "But how are you to keep it from her? Is it necessary that she should know it, that you may take the steps proper to the alteration of your circumstances? You must change your style of living." Observing a pang to pass across his countenance as I said this, I said, "Don't let that afflict you. I am sure you have never placed your happiness in outward show. And you yet have friends, warm friends, who will not think the worse of you for being less splendidly lodged. And surely it does not require a palace to be happy with Mary." "Oh, I could be happy with her," cried he, convulsively, in a hovel. "I could go down with her into poverty and the dust. I could. God bless her, God bless her," cried he, bursting into a transport of grief and tenderness. "And believe me, my friend," said I, stepping up and grasping him warmly by the hand, "believe me, she can be the same with you. Aye, and more. It will be a source of pride and triumph. To her it will call forth all the latent energies and fervent sympathies of her nature, for she will rejoice to prove that she loves you for yourself." There is in every true woman's heart a spark of heavenly fire, which lies dormant in the broad daylight of prosperity, but which kindles up and beams and blazes in the dark hours of adversity. No man knows what the wife of his bosom is. No man knows what a ministering angel she is until he has gone with her through the fiery trials of this world. There was something in the earnestness of my manner and in the figurative style of my language that caught the excited imagination of Leslie. I knew the auditor I had to deal with, and following up the impression I had made, I finished by persuading him to go home and unburden his sad heart to his wife. I must confess, notwithstanding all I had said, I felt some little solicitude for the result. Who can calculate on the fortitude of those whose life has been a round of pleasures? Her gay spirits might revolt at the dark downward path of low humility suddenly pointed out before her, and might cling to the sunny regions in which they had hitherto revelled. Besides, ruin in fashionable life is accompanied by so many galling mortifications, to which in other ranks it is a stranger. In short, I could not meet Leslie the next morning without trepidation. He had made the disclosure. "And how did she bear it?" I asked. "Like an angel. It seemed rather to be a relief to her mind, for she threw her arms around my neck and asked if this was all that had lately made me unhappy. But, poor girl," added he, "she cannot realize the change we must undergo. She has no idea of poverty, but in the abstract. She has only read of it in poetry, where it is allied to love. She feels as yet no privation, she suffers no loss of accustomed conveniences or elegancies. When we came practically to experience its sordid cares, its paltry wants, its petty humiliations, that will be the real trial. But," said I, "now that you have got over the severest task, that of breaking it to her, the sooner you let the world into the secret, the better. The disclosure will be mortifying, but then it is a single misery, and soon over, whereas you otherwise suffer in anticipation every hour, every day. It is not poverty so much as pretense that harasses a ruined man, the struggle between a proud mind and an empty purse, the keeping up a hollow show that must soon come to an end. Have the courage to appear poor, and you disarm poverty of its sharpest sting." On this point I found Leslie perfectly prepared. He had no false pride himself, and as to his wife, she was only anxious to conform to their altered fortunes. Some days afterwards he called upon me in the evening. He had disposed of his dwelling-house, and taken a small cottage in the country a few miles from town. Rather like me. He had been busied all day in sending out furniture. The new establishment required very few articles, and those of the simplest kind only. All the splendid furniture of his late residence had been sold, excepting his wife's harp. That, he said, was too closely associated with the idea of herself. It belonged to the little story of their loves, for some of the sweetest moments of their courtship were those when he had leaned over that instrument and listened to the melting tones of her voice. He could not but smile at this instance of romantic gallantry in a doting husband. He was now going out to the cottage where his wife had been all day superintending its arrangement. My feelings had become strongly interested in the progress of this family story, and as it was a fine evening, I offered to accompany him. He was wearied with the fatigues of the day, and as he walked out, fell into a fit of gloomy musing. "Poor Mary," he said at length, with a heavy sigh from his lips. "And what of her?" I asked. "Has anything happened to her?" "What?" he said, darting an impatient glance. "Is it nothing to be reduced to this paltry situation, to be caged in a miserable cottage, to be obliged to toil almost in the menial concerns of her wretched habitation?" "Has she then repined at the change?" "Repined! She has been nothing but sweetness and good humor. Indeed, she seems in better spirits than I have ever known her. She has been to me all love and tenderness and comfort." "Admirable girl!" exclaimed I. "You call yourself poor, my friend. You were never so rich. You never knew the boundless treasures of excellence you possess in that woman." "Oh, but my friend, if this first meeting at the cottage were over, I think I should then be comfortable. But this is her first day of real experience. She has been introduced into a humble dwelling. She has been employed all day in arranging its miserable equipments. She has for the first time known the fatigues of domestic employment. She has for the first time looked around her on a home destitute of everything elegant. almost of everything convenient, and may now be sitting down exhausted and spiritless, brooding over a prospect of future poverty. There was a degree of probability in this picture, and I could not gainsay, so we walked on in silence. After turning from the main road up a narrow lane, so thickly shaded with forest trees as to give it a complete air of seclusion, we came in sight of the cottage. It was humble enough in its appearance for the most pastoral poet, and yet it had a pleasing rural look. A wild vine had overrun one end with a profusion of foliage. A few trees threw their branches gracefully over it, and I observed several pots of flowers tastefully disposed about the door, and on the grass plot in the front. A small wicket gate opened up upon a footpath that wound through some shrubbery to the door. Just as we approached, we heard the sound of music. Leslie grasped my arm. We paused and listened. It was Mary's voice singing, in a style of the most touching simplicity, a little air which her husband was particularly fond. I felt Leslie's hand tremble on my arm. He stepped forward to hear more distinctly. His step made a noise on the gravel walk. A bright, beautiful face glanced out at the window and vanished. A light footstep was heard, and Mary came tripping forth to meet us. She was in a pretty rural dress of white. A few wild flowers were twisted in her fine hair. A fresh bloom was on her cheek. Her whole countenance beamed with smiles. I had never seen her so lovely. "My dear George," cried she, "I am so glad you are come. I have been watching and watching for you, and running down the lane and looking out for you. I've set out a table under a beautiful tree behind the cottage. I've been gathering some of the most delicious strawberries, for I know you are fond of them, and we have such excellent cream here, and everything is so sweet and still here. Oh," she said, and she put her arm within his, and looking up brightly in his face, "oh, we shall be so happy." Poor Leslie was overcome. He caught her to his bosom. He folded his arms around her, kissed her again and again. And again he could not speak, but the tears gushed into his eyes, and he has often assured me that though this world has since gone prosperously for him, his life has indeed been a happy one, yet never has he experienced a moment of more exquisite felicity. And I'll leave you a link for that on, and I didn't cry. I almost did. My tears welled up. So ladies, if this has been helpful to you, I would appreciate you if you would please leave a comment, and read the comments too on the story, for which I will leave the link. And ladies, if you need to always think of several things: your obligation to God, your obligation to your family, and your obligation to others. Now, most of us have got the God and family straightened out here, and excuse me, this is not a cold. I am just weeping a little bit over the story, so don't panic. But the others, what do you do? Well, what we like to do, one of our children that lives not far from here, is leave a box on his porch of oranges or home-baked goods, something like that. And letters are always welcome. Cards are always welcome. Money is welcome. And because I'll tell you something about money is that you come closer to meeting their people's needs because they know what they need better than you do, and it's harder, for you to get the right thing. And so, ladies, please, please, please serve yourself some tea, serve your children some tea, and drink it all day long. Have tea, dress up. I got dressed up for you. I even put my stretchy little handmade, hand-strung pearls on for you. And dress up for your family, dress up for yourself, dress up for your children. Keep your bathroom clean, keep your kitchen clean. Use that vinegar spray in the air and on your appliances, on everything, and it keeps the house from smelling toxic and medicine-y and detergent-y, And I have several videos on vinegar, on how helpful that is. And so, lady, I hate to say goodbye, but the clock on the clubhouse wall says it's time to go. And if any of you remember that, then you are getting elderly like me. And so, ladies, I love you. Please write to me. And my email is working now. It's on the left-hand side, and you can paste that. And go and write to me. Tell me if you want me to print it or if it's personal. If you're having trouble seeing if Google will post your comment, you'll have to wait a little while, because go ahead and post it and it'll come to my email, and then I will or into my dashboard, and I will publish it myself. Otherwise, send me an email to make sure that it gets there. Be sure, fix yourself up, look pretty. Don't be afraid to look pretty. Get out all the stuff that you never use or you never wear and use it, because if you have any faith, there's more where that came from. And have a lovely day. Go outside, go for a walk, be happy, and keep hope alive. I love you. Goodbye.